So good
Rob?
evening, Lisa. Hey, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good, Mike. Um, I got a little trouble getting on tonight, so let's give it a couple minutes here.
I was just getting a call from someone who was asking me some questions about that too. So give me a couple
Yeah,
minutes.
I had to just log back on. First time didn't work, but so Lisa, thank you for hosting tonight.
You are very welcome.
We're really gonna miss Jose, but
Yeah, don't get me started.
so I don't believe we've ever met. So, but we really appreciate your help tonight.
No worries, no worries. I am not a land use person. I'm the communications director for Supervisor Alcorn, but I'll do the best I can. And also provide him with feedback on tonight's meeting.
Okay, great. Usually we do record the meetings. Are you prepared to do that?
Yes, it is recording.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. So let me just take a little bit of an attendance here and see. All right, so it looks like Tammy's having trouble getting in. I want to tell her to just try it again. Uh,
Hey Rob, this is John Capila.
yes.
I was having some trouble earlier, so I'll make sure. And I had trouble getting on also. And once I did it again, it worked a second.
Yeah, that's same with me, John. So that's what I just tell Tammy.
Me too, Kennedy.
Isn't that nerve-wracking? Like you think it's something that you're doing, and then
There we go.
Also, if there's anyone who's a attendee that should be a panelist, if you could let me know, and I can move them over. I'm not as familiar with all the names as Jose.
okay.
I think, yeah, looking at that, I think I see Dennis Dixon on the list. He could probably be a panelist.
Okay, great.
That fan over your head, Mike, is really, kind of a halo. I'm not sure that's a fair thing to get that impression.
We can see through that, can't we?
Yeah, this group is too smart for that trick.
It really looks more like it's one of those whirligig hats, and you just can't see the hat, just the rapidly moving blade.
Propeller hat.
I think you're going to rotate right up into the ceiling soon.
William, how's your fencing?
Well, I had been on hiatus for a while, but we're getting back into it again. So, a lot of the big events I chose not to go to because you had to travel by air to the early events this year so far. Next one really is kind of mostly regional events this year. I'll probably attend. I have a small event April 2nd.
Good.
Yeah, they opened the clubs back up sort of the middle of last year, but doing a real aerobic sport of high intensity and wearing a mask underneath a mask is a little bit difficult. Not so hard to breathe, but boy, do you perspire a lot more. I've never had such a sweaty face.
All right, I'm just trying to get Tammy to get on. Oh, Tammy's on now. Okay, good.
I think just taking a peek through anyone else we have that need to be a presenter. Andrew, are you on?
I am.
Sounds like you're good to go then.
Okay.
All right, I think we have everybody. We certainly have a quorum, that's for sure. So let's go ahead and get started. So good evening, everybody. I'm Rob Walker, and this is the March 2022 Reston Planning and Zoning Committee. So I did send out a revised agenda late in the week, as the one application that was going to be before us tonight, I think it was called Lofts 2 by Pulte. They ended up saying that they weren't ready for us, and so they pulled out at the last minute. So if anybody is on the call tonight that is expecting to talk about the Lofts 2 at Pulte, which is located on Sunset Hills Road, that's going to come back to us. I think it's actually in May. So we're not going to be talking about that tonight. So we do have two things on the agenda tonight. The first thing is to try, we do have the meeting minutes that were distributed. Michelle distributed those a few days ago for the January meeting. And we were looking for either comment or approval of those tonight, if possible. Does anybody have any comments or want to make a motion?
Did you distribute those, Rob?
No, Michelle did those. Well, actually, no, I take that back.
You
I
did.
distribute those at the end of last week.
Yep.
I will confess I haven't read them, so I will abstain and defer to the wisdom of everyone else.
Rob,
Well,
how many?
I'll make a motion then to approve them.
I second.
Dick, you had a question?
I had the question, how many were there? Were there more than one?
Oh, meeting minutes, there was just the January meeting.
All right, good, thank you. It's already been moved, good.
Okay. So if all in favor accept the abstention for the meeting minutes of January 2022?
Aye.
Unless I hear otherwise, I will
Aye.
feel approved. All right, thanks, Michelle, for doing the meeting minutes, and thanks everybody for the approval. Okay, so all right, so the application before us tonight is the Fannie Mae application. We've certainly seen the application in the past, and we've had some good dialogue over several meetings. I think Mike is here tonight. Mike Van Atta with McGuire Woods. Mike, I don't know if Scott is with you tonight or Steve.
Yes, Scott actually has a family emergency, so he's probably going to join a little bit later. So you're stuck with me to begin with, but we do have the full team, Steve Caniglio and folks with Vica Wells Associates and Land Design as well to sort of help us through the presentation tonight.
Okay, I just didn't see Steve's name on here, but that's okay. So I guess let me tee this up a little bit, and Mike can really bring a lot more clarification. Originally, I think at the last meeting, there was a planned planning commission hearing date that was then deferred, and then there was the thought that the planning commission date might be sometimes in I guess, I don't know, early April, I will say. So we scheduled this meeting then, and then I think the planning commission date is now at the latter part of April. But then when I've talked to the applicant, our workload at P&Z now, all of a sudden, our calendar is starting to fill up, where our April meeting is now pretty booked, and May looks to be maybe a little crowded as well. So so we were trying to fit getting Fannie Mae to come back as we had asked them to. At the same time, we have big projects like Commerce Center and this Pulte Lofts 2 and a few other issues to tackle in likely April and May. So so the timing starts to get a little sensitive here in terms of when we can see applications and not. So I just want to give a little background there, because you know, some might say, hey, why are they back here tonight? And if their PC date is a little bit later in April, and that's one of the reasons why, is because it's our schedule as well that's starting to get pretty crowded. So so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike and let Mike take it from here, and then we'll go from there.
That sounds good. Thank you, Rob, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And I think I may need to ask permission to share my screen. So I don't know if Lisa, if that's you, who's controlling the capabilities there.
Yes, it is. Just give me a second.
No worries, take your time. But in the meantime, you know, thank you again, everyone, for being here, and happy spring. We made it. And you know, we're excited to be back. And you know, as Rob said, obviously we've had a number of meetings, you know, both as a collective group and also with you know, some individual you know, community groups and individual community members as well along the way, particularly the last couple of months. But we're excited to be back. It looks like I've got my screen sharing capabilities, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And can folks see the presentation up?
Yes.
Great. So of course, we're talking about the Fannie Mae zoning amendment, and as you know, everyone on the call knows, you know, there is a governing zoning approval on the site that dates back to the early 90s for office, and there is an existing office building on the property, and there's an approval for 2 additional office buildings that have not been constructed on the site. And really, what this zoning amendment is this PCA, proper condition amendment, is looking at doing is replacing those, instead of doing those 2 office buildings, 2 additional office buildings, it would be to deliver up to 90 new townhomes for the property. So I'm just going to go ahead and get into the presentation. And as I mentioned, I've got some folks here with me that are going to help me along the way in this presentation, because we spent a lot of time thinking about some of the comments, really a lot of the comments that we've received over the past few months. And really trying to address all the comments that we can, and try to figure out how the best way to sort of communicate a lot of the benefits that this project is going to put forward. So getting into sort of at a high level, the comprehensive plan for the property, it actually recommends mixed use up to 0.5 floor area ratio. The governing office zoning approval actually has more intensity than that at a 0.63 FAR. And so this development would, both from a use and a density perspective, bring the property better in conformance with the comprehensive plan and that mixed use option. In terms of density on the site, I know we've talked about this before, it would be a maximum density of 6 dwelling units per acre. And I think it's important to note that no bonus density is being taken for providing the expected affordable housing contributions. And I think what's great about this development is you're actually getting a relatively larger increase in ADUs, affordable dwelling units, versus WDUs, which is something you can get with the townhome project. And finally, just to sort of highlight right off the bat, we do have a proffer for RA membership. We have worked directly with the RA, Reston Association, on that language to meet with the Reston Association and potentially join as well. And so, you know, that's language that we've worked directly with Reston Association on. We're happy to have that language in the proffers now. Pivoting to density really quick, I just wanted to share this graphic because I know there's been some talks about, you know, how the density of the proposed residential development relates to some of the surrounding communities. And so what we're able to look at is a number of the surrounding communities. You've got the Sycamore Apartments, the Ivy Oak condos to the north, the Charter Oak townhomes, and North Shore directly to the east. And I think the story that we'd like to tell here is that the density really is compatible with those surrounding developments, and in fact, it is certainly not higher than any of those, and in many cases, that is actually lower than those. And a little bit later in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about the look and feel of the residential development, because I think that's where some of the action actually really is in terms of sort of the raw numbers. But I did just want to sort of highlight that off the bat, and we can sort of circle back to some of those points a little bit later.
Hey, Mike, this is Steve.
Yeah.
Really
Yes,
quick, if you could just explain, for Fannie Mae, it says 15 acres. Our site is 29 acres, but you're only using 15 acres when you calculate the density.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Steve, and definitely not one to be overlooked. The way that that's calculated is we're essentially taking the land area out that supports the office building at a 0.5 FAR. So you really are looking at just the residential portion of the site, and you're not taking that on the entire 29 acres of property. So you sort of got that factored in already. That you're shrinking the site to look at just that residential portion. So, thanks, Steve.
Okay, and also, at one point, you're not taking credit for the land that was already dedicated to the parks when you calculate the density.
That is correct, and that was a comment in the staff report. Was how the density calculation was playing out, and in talking through those, really the density that was already dedicated to Nova Parks with that initial zoning application, which is actually this parcel over here, that is not being utilized for this density calculation, and so that's not relying on what's technically off-site property right now to support our density. We're looking at it strictly from the on-site portions.
Gotcha.
Thanks, Steve. And just building off that, obviously the the density calculations, and Lynn, I did see your question there, and those have been acknowledged by staff. And that was a lot of the conversations was in terms of how we're looking at it, and it has to do with land dedications before and after 1995, and that basically what the zoning ordinance has been interpreted to say is that the dedications prior to 1995 don't reserve density credit. And frankly, there's some nuances to that, but we're happy to just resolve that issue and get it off the table. And we don't need that extra land area to support it. But I think honestly, more importantly, is looking at that approved office. Obviously, we have the existing building there. You see the two buildings that could be built under the existing entitlement with no additional zoning action. That again, that the residential portion that we're proposing would be overall 220,000 square feet less GFA than that office approval. So in and of itself, that's a reduction in density in accordance with the comprehensive plan. But actually, I think more importantly is what that really means in terms of impacts. And one of the most important things is really the visual impact. I mean, I think even the existing building, you can really see it, from a number of spots around the on different surrounding properties. These two buildings here, they can be up to 130 feet tall. That really is, we think maybe not the best outcome for the property, just given its surrounding context, with the adjacent residential uses there, particularly a little bit closer to some residential uses. And so that's one reason we really think that residential is a better outcome, is because it's just the compatibility factor is way higher than what you're getting with the office building. Not to mention any lighting or anything else that you try to control from the office buildings.
So Mike, from a compatibility standpoint, we have townhomes that are, let's say, I'll guess high, 40 to 50 feet high, compared to what is already approved from that old zoning, which is 130-foot office buildings.
That's right.
Okay.
That's correct. That is correct. Similarly, there's environmental impacts, and we've talked about this in the weeds a little bit before, and we'll have some more conversations about it tonight. But the existing office approval, the footprint of those buildings certainly does not align, and not just the buildings, but it's really the below grade garage parking structure that wasn't built but can be, and it really doesn't align with how the site was constructed into the site's existing environmental quality corridor, the EQC. And you can actually see it right here. This is the limits of that below grade garage. It goes into what is now Pond C. That is something that with the residential portion, and we'll see this later in the presentation, would not occur. And it's just not the best environmental outcome there. But in a similar vein, vehicle trip reduction as well. And I think, Kevin, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you, Kevin, with Wells. We can talk a little bit about the comparison of vehicle trips from the approved office to what we're proposing with the residential.
Yeah, as Mike said, this is Kevin Flynn with Wells and Associates, and this is probably the most relevant information that came from the traffic impact study, where just changing the office use, the approved office use to the residential, I mean, you have a significant reduction in traffic. And actually, the traffic study evaluated up to 100 townhomes. So this table has now been adjusted to what's now being proposed with 10% less, or 90 townhomes. As you can see from the table, it's 82% less vehicle daily traffic. And when you look at the peak hours, which is the measure of traffic impact studies, it's essentially reducing your traffic by 88% during the AM peak hour and 86% during the PM peak hour. And this is what really was the information that the county wanted the traffic study to really look at. How can you really essentially remove turn lanes, make the site more pedestrian, more bicycle friendly, with the virtue of the change of the use.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Kevin. And so, we can talk a little bit about some of the transportation improvements that we're making as well, but I think that sort of helps drive the point home, and just sort of conceptualizing the approved office versus the residential uses that we're proposing. Switching gears a little bit, I wanted to sort of reframe the site objectives in terms of how the design team was looking at designing this layout and this project, and sort of in looking at what Reston is and what the current and also the draft Reston plan say in terms of what Reston is and should be. And those are really fundamental to, not only sort of the initial sort of visioning of the layout and frankly, just the use, but also some of the changes that we've made along the way. And I think as some of you may know, in the updated Reston plan, or the draft revised Reston plan, there's really strong objectives for establishing green neighborhoods and biophilic design techniques. And for some folks, maybe not aware of that buzzword, I think there's some different definitions out there, but it really is a mechanism for ensuring that the site design is in harmony with environmental objectives on a property, with principles like a green network, but both in terms of the site's natural and open space features, and also the building design and how that's all integrated together. And those are things that we have very deliberately looked at with the site design to preserve, enhance, integrate, and really celebrate the site's natural and open space features. I mean, anyone who's been over there knows that there's some really fantastic open space amenities over there that we're looking to improve and provide even greater public access to. And so, what we're looking at is, the clustered design, it really serves to minimize environmental impacts, particularly, down here closer to the stream valley, where that office building could go into, or the parking garage could go into. But generally, providing significant open space improvements and ultimately bringing both, the new residents who live in these townhomes, but also the surrounding community members into nature. And these objectives are inherent to the foundation of Reston, as you all know, and are frankly paramount to the approach for this development. And the design team can speak a little bit about that a little bit later. Generally the open space amenities, the pond improvements that we've talked about, and the pedestrian connections, they're yielding a new green network through the site and to some of the surrounding communities as well. And obviously you've got the WNOD there, and we're integrating that into the site design, and sort of transitioning from the stable clusters over towards the more urban metro oriented development. And I think having this green network of open space amenities is just fantastic, and that's something that we've really tried to integrate into the site design. Really the design of the townhomes follows suit with expectations for green building certification. We've got proffered commitments for infrastructure for solar panel installation in all the homes, infrastructure for EV charging in all the garages, and a number of other building and site energy efficiency components. So, really the primary goal being that the improvements on the property and ultimate development is going to yield a clear net environmental benefit in comparison to the governing office approval and frankly what's currently existing on the site. And John Amitetti with VICA's on, and he's going to walk you through some of those specifics in terms of what the environmental improvements are on the site and some of the EQC considerations. But John, are you with us? Maybe muted if you're on.
No, I think John's on, but he's listed as an attendee. I don't know if you have to add him to the panel or something.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
I can take care of that.
Okay, great. If I can get my participant list up here.
Okay, should be good to go.
John, you there?
I'm going to flip him a note. And if not, I'm just going to keep rolling with it in the interest of time here.
Guess the good thing
to get in touch with him.
Okay. Well, why don't we come back to the environmental aspect of it, because there's a lot of other things we can talk about here. So I'm going to flip ahead a little bit here and kind of jump to right where I left off anyways. And obviously, John, if you get to a point where you're able to sort of run through some of that stuff, just let us know. And if not, I can cover it. Pivoting back to really the notions of the biophilic community, there's really a number of parks and open space improvements that I was just talking about. And so to be a little bit more specific about some of those, generally there's going to be an increase of 1.23 acres of open space from the office approval. And so that's for an unmatched total of 18 acres of open space on the overall property. There's also going to be a dedication of over 2 acres south of the WNOD trail to Nova Parks to set the foundation for a future linear park. This is probably the largest contribution to the public park network in recent history, and you're seeing that right here. This piece was already dedicated to Nova Parks, and then this piece will be dedicated along with this application to really begin the framework for a great public park across the area. In addition, on the property, the application property as well, you've got over 9 acres of publicly accessible open space. And so this includes...
Mike, can you hear me now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, why don't I finish this section because we're already in there, then I'll flip back to the environmental piece. That way we're not jumping around too much. And frankly, this probably made more sense for the flow anyways.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, John, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I was muted. They said the host had me muted. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I didn't know we could mute you. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, evidently.
Well, hey, I'll finish this section, then I'll flip it back over to you, John.
I apologize to the committee.
No, that's all right. So just to sort of keep rolling here, I just mentioned there's going to be over 9 acres of publicly accessible open space on the property, and a lot of that includes the existing trail network, which is going to have a range of improvements. But a lot of it is in the vein of integrating the ponds as public scenic amenities and include new public recreation amenities for both the new residents but also surrounding community members. And so that includes a playground, open lawn areas, some other features on the trail network that we'll talk about a little bit later. But there will also be private open spaces areas for the residents of the townhomes. There's a centerpiece sort of being the central green muse, and we've done some work to sort of enhance the streetscape in the townhome area to sort of help the townhome area have a little bit more private open space as well that we can talk about a little bit later.
Mike, one thing I want to jump in here now, go back to the last slide you were just at.
Yeah.
You see in the far right, in the bottom, kind of like where it curves around that last pond. So all the ponds are now going to be publicly accessible, and there'll be trails around the outsides of all the ponds, which will also be accessible. Which I know that that Matt and Andrea will talk about later, but
yeah.
But that was one of the changes we made So it's not broken up, so to speak. You know, you can
That's right.
you can go wherever you want to go near the ponds. So
Right.
go ahead. Sorry.
Right. Frankly, and that's going to be, I think, important from a maintenance perspective as well, is that so that you've got sort of a logical break between the public and the private amenities. But that's a good point, Steve. And you know, one thing that I think that we all think is very exciting for this project is that what really weaves all this together are those existing art features that are out there today, and those, you know, really symbolize and include verses by famous poets that establish the site as an extended garden. It promotes the appreciation of nature using the power of verse, and that is sort of, you know, the inherent, you know, foundation, you know, to the core of what a, you know, biophilic community really is. And so you're getting that through sort of a literary imagination, as well as sort of the physical actually approach of these art installations. So making the majority of these art installations publicly accessible, you know, certainly invokes the spirit of the biophilic community, and we're happy to you know, increase the amenities around those, increase public access to them, and really celebrate them. So John, why don't I flip it back over to you now to talk a little bit about the environmental considerations on the property.
Sure, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yep, all good.
Right. I actually was able to finally join by the computer. Thank God, huh?
Right.
The ponds are staying obviously in the same configuration and location that they are. Something interesting about these ponds that I think is worth mentioning is the current ponds have over 13 acre-feet of storage, which is really an amazing amount of storage for a site of this size. This storage, the purpose of this was to really provide an environmental benefit, not just for the site, but for off-site areas coming in, as well as for the downstream, and all of that's going to be maintained. What our thrust was when we looked at this system, and working with staff and looking at some of the comments, was right off the bat, what we have up there is we really didn't want any encroachments in any wetlands. There are some small wetland areas around the ponds, and we've modified the plan so that that's a fact. We wanted to establish the floodplain as an undisturbed area, which it is, and the RPA, which is actually a very small area, very far to the east. We clearly did not want to get into any disturbance in that area, and we basically wanted to adopt a strategy where we were trying to prove the ponds and the function of these ponds. And some of the things that we have brought into the plan that you've already know about, but some of them are new. We clearly are committing to a limits of clearing and grading with this application or amendment to it, which the original one didn't have one. We're supplementing the aquatic benches with a more maintainable bench. These ponds are almost 30 years old, so some of them had aquatic benches, but they were not as good as some of the benches that we're going to try and establish, that we've committed to establish along the perimeter of these ponds for maintainability. We're putting in a sediment forebay in Pond A, which has an inflow of something around 50 acres in that range. The total drainage area to Pond A is I think 60 acres. And we're putting an aquatic bench along there, but we're also putting in that sediment forebay, which will make this system more maintainable. What happens when there's big storms is you get a resuspension of particulate matter and so forth. And also, when you go to clean a pond like this, it's much more maintainable if you've got a sediment forebay that'll be below the surface. We've also committed to making sure that the pond depths are of a depth where they will develop a functional aquatic environment that minimizes the prevalence of invasive species moving in. Pond A in particular has a big problem with invasive plants moving into the pond, and a lot of it has to do with the warmth of the water and the depth. One of the things we worked with staff was we maximized use of biofilters as pre-treatment devices into the ponds. We did want to use, and would ask that we still be able to use some structural devices to catch trash and things like that. But we've committed to putting in biofilters as a primary means of developing pre-treatment of flows into the pond. We've also committed to investigate our ability to use the pond water for irrigation, which is important as an environmental aspect to reduce water volume and of course use the water in a natural environment to provide irrigation. The removal of invasive species is on this list, and we've done that. We're committed for that, and the tree canopy and so forth. That I'd like to actually turn it over to Matt if he's on with us
John,
to talk
I
about
think-
what we're doing with the invasive species and the tree canopy and so forth. Matt.
Well, I think the interesting thing with that is obviously after you take out the invasives, we've kind of at least planned initially a good amount of category 4 and category 3 trees, which I mean, as a practical matter, is trees that grow either 25 to 50 feet tall or 50 feet plus. And I think there's a great opportunity. The county has a fairly robust list, but when you cross-reference that with native and adaptive species, there are a ton of opportunities there to use materials that, this will sound weird, might have been frowned upon in the past, honestly. But we're seeing a great benefit to using native and adaptive species. And I think that's really the key takeaway, John, from this. Get out the bad and really put something in there that will affect a much better system for the site.
So Matt, you're going to increase the total tree save and increase the canopy.
Yes. Yep.
Gotcha.
And because of this site and the way it lays out, we're able to use the tree save to meet a lot of our tree preservation criteria, right, Matt?
Yes, absolutely.
And this
got some numbers on that if we need to discuss them, but that's the upshot of it.
And this different in the past, and I'll let John, you and Matt probably know better than me. A big chunk of this will have a conservation easement on top of it, which did not exist before.
That's correct. It's pretty typical now to put EQC areas into an easement that ensures its preservation, ensures its maintenance, and also just identifies this area that it's fairly sensitive, and that any development in the area short of maintenance situations and so forth would need to be typically Mike Van Atta, typically would be something that would need to be approved by the director.
Yep.
So it's while it's not meant to be limiting, it's meant to be to basically be that area really cannot be modified from the natural environment that we're going to create without another approval. And because this is a zoning, it would be something that would be proffered, that it would need to be something that everybody agrees is something that needs to be done for a particular reason. And it would typically be to improve a situation. There also on that list, before we go to this slide, was the increase or decrease in impervious area. The original application, well, it had 3 buildings. It had a massive underground garage underneath it, which is considered impervious because the water really doesn't go into the ground. It goes onto the top of the garage, and then kind of ultimately gets discharged into piping and so forth. And that's a big attribute to what's going on here. It makes the ponds even more effective than they are now.
Gotcha. What about the EQC? There you go.
Well, the EQC, let's talk about EQC. EQC is has a factual component. It's in the policy plan. Its components are hydrology, topography, hydraulics, stream protection, pollution reduction, and it includes 100-year floodplain, steep slopes adjacent to a stream valley in that floodplain, wetlands that are connected to the stream valleys, and basically establishes a buffer. There were areas that you see on this plan with the original application, which is the blue line, which was shown as an approximate EQC line that was established as EQC with that application. What we've done here and our strategy was to improve upon these EQC areas and the opportunities presented based on the as-built condition. In some instances, the ponds are actually of a different configuration than was originally anticipated, and in some areas, the most sensitive areas to the east, where you see the road go over the bridge, that's actually still a stream valley, and those are the most sensitive areas. One of the most important things to remember about this site, and this speaks to the environmental stewardship in the Reston Comprehensive Plan, is that all this water quality and volume reduction, peak reduction, is happening at the headwaters of this stream, which is most productive, and that's why it's actually in the Reston plan. I think it says a watershed that protects headwater areas. This is clearly a headwater area, was recognized early as one, and this entire EQC, the previously approved one, was actually identified as a water quality, quote unquote, EQC more than anything else. But there is a stream valley, right where you see those words conservation easement. That's actually still an existing natural stream valley. The other thing to remember is that this site, when it was originally developed, was I guess a distillery, and it was highly disturbed. I mean, it was compacted. If you look at a 1972 aerial, it's nothing but small buildings and parking lots and so forth. It was highly compacted, and so the original application was trying to interdict that situation. What you're looking at here is a comparison in blue of the EQC that was anticipated with the original application and what we're talking about in this. We have a net increase of 40,100 square feet of EQC, and we weren't really trying to hit a number as much as we were trying to protect the most sensitive areas of this site, and that's what I think we've done. We've talked to staff about their feelings, and I think we've got them in some agreement that the areas that we're enhancing and expanding the EQCs are certainly of value. And the areas where the blue are outside is areas where it doesn't really meet the EQC policy. I don't know if you want to go to this slide. This is probably the bigger area. It's about 4,127 square feet. The average slope in that area is around 4 or 5 to 8% on the north side of the existing trail, which is pretty much in line with the trail that we show in there. And so we're bringing the EQC right to the trail, and we've actually done that in several places. We thought it would be disingenuous to put a trail into an EQC, so we stopped the EQC on the downward part of the trail so that we're capturing all the sensitive perimeter areas. And so that's what's the story in some of these areas but then we also increased the EQC in areas where it did meet the criteria, and it has the steeper slopes, and it's adjacent to stream valleys, and the buffer is most productive. Staff gave us some ideas of other areas, and we incorporated them, and we continue to agree that any other areas that they deem are worthwhile, that we more than willing to look at, right, Mike?
Yeah, that's also sort of extremely well said, and I just want to sort of highlight that we're looking at the discrepancy between these two areas. I think you said it right in that it's the areas in red that we are showing are areas that are more critical for environmental benefits to the EQC in accordance with the comprehensive plan policy. And that's not to take away anything from what's in blue, but when we drill down to some of the discrepancy areas, this one in particular, you have existing trails going through there, but you said 4 to 5% grade. The EQC policy states that it should be 15% grade to be an EQC, and it should be connected to the stream valley. So it really doesn't meet that criteria, but notwithstanding the we sort of the quote unquote deletion of EQC of this approximately 4,127 square feet area, you're getting a net increase of 40,000 square feet in replacement area. But more importantly, in more critical locations near the RPA down here, you can see the grade on this sheet right here. That's got significant grades. And actually, the EQC finally will include all of the ponds on site, which the current EQC doesn't. Interestingly enough, so it really is a net benefit to the site. So overall, the final all said and done, you'll have over 7 acres of contiguous EQC on the property, and in critical locations. So we really John, you mentioned our conversations with staff. We have cut I don't know how many graded cross sections. We could talk about it forever, but we spent basically done essentially a construction drawing looking at the grading across the property to sort of show exactly what's going on in different areas of the existing and proposed EQC to make sure that what we're talking about and everything
that we can deliver what we're talking about. But the grading plan that we did is, I wouldn't want to bring up here. It's got a lot of information on it, but it was a construction drawn quality, and I think staff agreed. And we went through and did an analysis of the entire northern edge. The southern edge is important too, but it was not really as critical to make sure we could deliver what we said we could deliver. And I think staff agreed that the upside of doing that detailed grading plan was we were able to remove quite a few walls, and we were also able to lower walls to where I believe, if I misspeak, Dennis or Matt, please correct me, but the vast majority of the walls are like 2 to 3 feet.
No, that's correct, John, and particularly at that Pond B area, as you were talking about.
Yeah, and we that's really important that they can act as seat walls, right, Matt, and kind of fit in with the whole environment, which really makes things special, I think, and things don't look forced. They look.
No, they're much more integrated.
And I guess at the risk of droning on too long about the EQC, just one final point, John. Can you sort of elaborate why you're seeing some areas like here or some other areas not shown in the EQC?
Well, yeah. What the reason why is there's trails in there, or there's areas like particularly that one to the far east. There's some art in there. I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what they are. They're like it's like a peace garden, I think, and it's got some stones and monuments in there. And it's an area that we wouldn't necessarily want to revegetate that area, but that it's meant to be like that. And while you could say it's a scenic EQC, we were trying to come up with an EQC plan that was genuine and didn't try and count areas that somebody could say, oh, that area is developed. And so we didn't count those areas. We're still committing that those areas will remain undisturbed, but they really can't be revegetated as to the degree that we plan on doing in the red areas.
Right. So said differently, we really wanted to meet the criteria straight up and not take any liberties with it.
Yeah. And that's important because when you're doing a comparison like this, it really should be apples to apples.
Right. So let's switch gears here. We talked about the public open space and amenities. We talked about the environmental considerations. We talked about the public art, and we did just sort of touch on some of the pedestrian connectivity. Frankly, I think this is where a lot of the action is in terms of some of the changes we've made since the last time we got together as a group. And frankly, is where a lot of the action is in terms of a lot of the individual conversations we've had with some of the adjacent communities and specific community members to really make sure that we're putting forward a site design that has full public access through the site and is sort of really convenient for everyone, both living there but also in the surrounding area. So I'm going to turn over to Matt Clark with land design, and he can sort of walk you through some of the changes and some of the enhancements we made.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Again, yeah, Matt Clark with land design. I just wanted to run through a few slides for everyone that look at the trails both in detail and in general, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of information on this sheet for sure, and we'll try to distill that down in some following slides. But the big takeaway for this one is, when you think about the trails, we really do view them as the connective tissue, for this community. certainly within and without. And this looks at just a couple, literally getting in the weeds kind of things of, we know that the surface of the trails out there have been degraded. They've been out there a long time. We're looking at some options to improve those, to give a more stable surface for the trails, and there's a kind of a schematic design detail in the upper right corner there. But we're also looking at things like upgrades to the bench seating out there. Certainly dog walking facilities, whether that's dog weigh stations or possibly water stations, things of that nature. An upgraded waste receptacle kind of program that's certainly come up in the past, and there's a need for it. And even things like possibly low-level lighting where appropriate along the trails to help not both from an aesthetic and also kind of a functional standpoint. So the next slide, maybe you could go to that, Michael. These are the things that I wanted to kind of talk about. And as Michael said, there really are kind of the big moves, changes, whatever you want to call it. And I'll hit on each of these with a follow-on slide. But really, the kind of the takeaways are that we now have a trail from North Shore that is publicly accessible 24/7, at least proposed. We have a plan that accommodates public pedestrian access for the entirety of American Dream Way. There are a few potential new connections to the WO&D trail. And then I'd kind of like to finish off with just a quick discussion of some of the frontage improvements along Sunset Hills. Kevin can certainly talk about some of the improvements to the intersection, Sunset Hills, and Andrea will focus in on a few last slides here to kind of get a little more granular in terms of what's going on in and around the townhouses, both from the streetscape perspective as well as some of the usability of those spaces. So maybe, Michael, if you could slide to the next one. This is kind of a simple overlay of the graphic that I showed you earlier, but it really does highlight kind of the access points of the community. Certainly starting in the upper right is the public access that's there off North Shore. That's intended to remain. The one down at Sunset Hills, again, kind of the bookend to that one that I just talked about. But along the WO&D trail, we're certainly looking to improve the access point there. There's kind of a one in there now, but it needs to be reconsidered in terms of literally accessibility. And certainly the public access coming off of Old Reston. And you'll see a fifth kind of circle kind of orbiting here on the plan. There has been some discussion of an optional access point up to Ivy Oak. And I think the real takeaway, at least for me from this graphic, is that we do have this hit from kind of all points of the compass in terms of getting people into the site and around it. The next slide is actually, it's kind of a follow-on to this one, but really it again reinforces our access to our site off the WO&D, but also the potential for a new access point coming off the WO&D up through the 2-acre Parks Authority reservation and ultimately possibly up to Sunset Hills. So again, I think from a getting people onto the site perspective, we've got a lot of great options there. The next few slides are just really follow-ups, honestly, and they just kind of reinforce that people transiting through the site. So this does show the connection from North Shore. It's all on our site. Everyone knows there were several discussions at one point about possibly being off-site and everything else. We think we have a plan now that accommodates for this, works with the grading and some of the practical realities out there, and provides that kind of unfettered north-south access. The next question then to my mind is, all right, well, how does it work with the American Dream Way kind of east-west access? And what we're proposing here is a combination of trail on the north side of ADW and then a pivot over to the south side, i.e. in front of the townhouses. But this would allow for complete access along ADW with several points where you could actually pierce down into the park, if that makes any sense. But I just kind of kept it simple here for the basic overlay. And then the last kind of piece of the puzzle in terms of ringing the site is the Sunset Hills road frontage improvements. I mean, basically we're calling for the plan now is to go from Old Reston over to the intersection with ADW. And it allows for a 5-foot trail to be put in, at this point in time, but there's a reservation for a larger 9-foot trail that could be installed later on. And I think that circling the site is a critical piece of this. We are providing, like I said, unfettered access around it. And I'll jump off at this point because the next piece to talk about is the implications down at the intersection with Sunset Hills and American Dream.
This is Kevin Flynn with Wells and Associates again, and I'm kind of coming back to that the chart showing the dramatic decrease in traffic, and what we were able to do and work with VDOT and FCDOT was really relook at this intersection and kind of take it away from that vehicular orientation, what the intersection was, with the anticipation of future office, and start creating a lot of new pedestrian enhancements, removing turn lanes. Today, where American Dream Way intersects Sunset Hills Road, there's no crosswalk, and you're crossing 7 lanes of traffic, and there's a median in between. And so what we're able to do is start bumping out those curbs, and with the accepting lanes that take you into the site, take that down from 3 lanes down to 2 lanes, and then use that pavement that goes across the bridge where you really have like a 6-lane divided roadway where the bridge goes across over the WOD trail, and start converting pavement to be dedicated bike lanes. And then as the American Dream Way travels southbound towards Sunset Hills Road, where you had those 4 lanes, we're able to shrink that down to 3 lanes and provide that dedicated bike lane. The other thing that we were doing was there is an existing crosswalk crossing Sunset Hills Road on the east side of the intersection. And, that's something that the county and VDOT was working with them to kind of provide that high visibility crosswalk that's going to facilitate, additional the crossing across Sunset Hills Road. And then, then the east-west connection, as we talked about the frontage improvements, provide that sidewalk.
Thanks, Kevin. And just to sort of, round it out here, I know we're sort of coming up close to the hour. We did get started a little bit late, but we wanted to talk a little bit about how, in response to some of the comments that we've heard, in some of the previous meetings, there were a lot of comments related to sort of the look and feel of the townhomes themselves in the surrounding area. And so I'm going to let Andrea Crossett with Land Design elaborate, but we've worked very closely with staff, planning commissioner, and some of the community members to revise the townhome design to provide a more efficient streetscape framework within the townhome area, and to provide more interior green space, a greater sense of front yards for the rear loaded unit. I don't know, Andrea, if you can maybe elaborate on something specific.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Again, this is Andrea with Land Design. And as Mike had said, we've gone through several iterations of the townhouse streetscape, specifically in keeping with staff requirements, regarding the landscape amenity panel and sidewalk widths. However, after several, I would say, beneficial in-person meetings with Commissioner Carter and through the community's feedback, we've revised these streetscapes for the homes. So we're flipping the sidewalk from being located directly adjacent to the street or to the parking to having a decent sized landscape amenity panel that's full of street trees. That was one of the comments, is to really green this up. And you can kind of see that in the private street that rings. Yeah, thanks, Mike. So a landscape amenity panel that's full of street trees. They're all 7 to 8 feet wide, a 5 to 6 foot sidewalk, and then a nice sizable front yard, for grilling or for whatever you wanted to do. But that was directly, taken from, I think, not only Commissioner Carter's suggestions, but the community's suggestions. And I won't go through all the nitty gritty of the dimensions there, but you kind of get the idea in terms of the streetscape.
Right. And one thing we were able to do is also sort of realign the open private views with this opens up into the public amenity as well. So just the way that all sort of plays together is nice. One thing I wanted to touch on, which is somewhat related, is you'll see there's no longer 2 units located right here. And actually, I'll just zoom in a little bit. This is a very small wetland located north of Pond B. It's technically connected to Pond B via a pipe. It doesn't technically meet the EQC standards, but we understand the desire to preserve it in accordance with the Reston plan as well. So we have dropped units there and now have significant buffers. I mean, this is a 50-foot area right there. It's going to be fully landscaped, and now we have a nice bridge crossing over there. So that's just an initial wetland area that we've got. I wanted to call that change out to the group.
It's a pedestrian bridge.
That's right. That's right. Just a pedestrian bridge. And then just to sort of finish up the presentation, because I know that we've been looking for a while now. There was also some comments about rear-loaded units not necessarily being in harmony with sort of the vibe of Reston, so to speak, or not being sort of true to Reston. And we've thought about that. We've taken a look around. And there are a number of other examples of rear-loaded units in Reston, and I think the ones at West Market on the west side of the town center were done tastefully, and they're a more urban context. And we also have these are the EYA townhomes that are under construction, but are approved. Really, I think it makes sense to have a transition from the more urban, town center area to the more stable, clusters to the north and west. To the east. And I think the rear loads can help do that as sort of a logical transition. But actually, it gives you a diversity of housing types, which is certainly inherent goal in Reston as well. But it reduces impervious surface compared to the front loads as well, because you don't have those long driveways, and so it's actually a more efficient layout that way. And we're able to get some of the streetscape improvements that Andrea was talking about, and sort of that green ring there. So ultimately, it provides a diversity in using type in housing types, and in combination with the ADUs and WDUs that will support more attainable and inclusive housing in Reston, in walking distance to the metro. We think that's a benefit. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up here, because we've been talking for a while. I'm not going to go ahead and list all the sort of things we've talked about, but we did want to cover the overall list of benefits that that we saw in terms of the public open space improvements, the connected publicly accessible trail network, environmental impact enhancements, and mitigation of impacts, some of the transportation improvements that we talked about, and just the range of open space amenities that we think is just a great opportunity for this property and in Reston in general. And just to close it out, I know there's been questions about the proffers in terms of what the old proffers say versus the new ones. And we're pleased to say that we're carrying forward all of the relevant proffers in all of those commitments. And that's really what you're seeing here. I'm definitely not going to go through all of these. But I do know that we sent this out to the group that we're carrying forward all of the previous proffers. And just to sort of finally touch on some of the nitty-gritty of the proffers, in terms of the just so everyone's sort of on the same page, along the northern property line, the fence with IVO, we have committed to retaining that fence, but we're going to leave it open to say that if conversations with IVO, they want that fence to either be taken down or a gate put in, we're happy to do sort of whatever makes the most sense there. And we're sort of giving ourselves the flexibility to do that, subject to what IVO decides to do there. Similarly, with we've talked about, or Matt covered the the trail to North Shore. At the baseline, that is going to be that that public connection, and if there is any alternative to a secure facility, it'll be on site, and you'll still have a public trail connection. And we've committed to, in the proffers, working with staff, the zoning administrator, Fairfax County Transportation, and the urban center section, so that any fence that goes up, they have to memorialize, or they have to bless, I guess, it's sort of in conformance with the plan. And then finally, and then I'll stop talking here. At a baseline, we're committing from a vehicular standpoint to have the entirety of American Dreamway publicly accessible and open to the public. And we've got a similar carve out in the proffers that say, if there's a secure tenant, we'll work with staff and the zoning administrator on potential secure measures, gates and stuff like that. So that, if there's a specific tenant with specific needs, we can review those needs and craft a secure situation that makes sense. But sort of having the details to support that. So I just want to provide a couple of those updates to round us out. And, again, I really appreciate everyone hanging with us in a long presentation. I know we've thrown a lot of information out at you, and I've talked fast, but we're excited about the project and the opportunity. We're just really looking forward to having an engaged conversation with everyone. I guess finally, we are, given what Rob Walker said at the beginning of this meeting, given the timing consideration with, the group's schedule in April and sort of the level of details that, you know, we've sort of landed on with this project. We are looking for a vote tonight. We obviously want to have a very productive conversation, you know, leading up to that, and are happy to answer a number of questions. But I just wanted to sort of, you know, set that expectation. That's, you know, sort of what we're looking to, you know, get out of this meeting here tonight. So with that, I'll definitely turn it over to the group, and we're happy to answer any questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike, and your team. You know, quite a bit of information there for sure. And I think, as most of us might recall, a lot of, I think, what was addressed tonight, you know, some of those concerns were raised by certain committee members, but others, I think we saw some of that come out of the county staff report as well. So before I jump into the committee, Jan Delucian has had her hand raised in the chat for almost, you know, 40 minutes. Jan, do you have something a question you had to ask?
Yes, I do. Unfortunately, it's added a second question on the transportation study. If I understand correctly, you're saying that American Dreamway would become a public access road for all traffic.
Go to the I want to make sure I understood the question. The question was that, you know, whether this was Old Reston Avenue was going to be open to all public traffic. Is that right?
No, I thought I heard him say that American Dreamway would be fully publicly accessible.
So it'll certainly have 100% pedestrian accessibility.
Okay.
Not outlined. In terms of vehicular circulation, our baseline is that it will be fully publicly accessible. Although if there's a secure tenant who has requirements that the office building portion of American Dreamway be secure, then we have the flexibility to work with the zoning administrator and county staff to restrict public access through the office portion of American Dreamway.
Okay, so the traffic study assumes that the number will be less, but we'll have all in Reston who want to take American Way going through there as well. There's no way to estimate those numbers.
I
Sorry,
can't hear what's being said. Sorry.
Well,
I'm sorry, is it too, am I too soft?
You're breaking up a little bit.
Okay, is that a little better?
A little bit.
All right. The question was whether or not the traffic study is still valid if it's open to all traffic to go on American Way.
Yeah, this is Kevin Feline with Wells and Associates. So actually, when we scoped the traffic study with Fairfax County's Department of Transportation and VDOT, they were kind of looking for this scenario. So we actually evaluated the project with two options. One option where the gates remained, and another option where the gates were removed. So the traffic study evaluates both conditions.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, that was just a last minute question.
All right.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jan.
The question that I wanted to raise was, as usual for me, the number of units. I did some measurements on the acreage for the cluster, and at roughly, and I actually went plus side for you guys, to being between 4 and 5 acres. So that means we're going to be putting 90 units in those I actually came up with 3.5 acres, but that acreage, which under the 6 would only be 30 units. So we're going to be putting 90 in a very small area. The numbers used for evaluating the unit dwellings, sorry, I have a mild brain injury, so I speak hesitantly. The amount of acreage that's covered by water and not walkable, usable, and buildable, is also 5 acres. I am concerned about that in the first place, to say we're doing 6 units per acre when the entire place would not hold more than 30 under the best estimate of the size of the cluster. When you talked about the building, if you could pull back up the slide for a second, the original plan. Sorry to make you go over that.
No, it's okay.
The third building that would be built takes up 50% of the space, if not less, than the current plan. So the current zoning leaves a lot for the environmental area. So I discount the difference between one building that's only 50% of the size of the 90 townhomes. Height, of course, is an issue, but I'm throwing it out as explain to me why that makes sense, and that's more to the commission. And when we're talking about step down look and feel, Strathmore Square, which is right next to this area and coming off of the town center area, has a more reasonable step down look than this does. And that's me, unless someone has a question.
Thank you, Jan. I guess, Jan, since you punted that back to the committee, just a quick comment from my point of view. I mean, I understand you're trying to make a comparison to the previously approved plan to the new plan, but also not taking into account the larger context of the site. But I mean, that's certainly one way to look at it when you're trying to compare densities. But when you have a site like this that has a lot of open space and ability to, the applicant is not penalized for that, and they are able to take that. It's well within the parameters of the zoning ordinance and even our Reston guidelines. So I mean, they're not doing anything out of turn, I guess, in taking that acreage into account when they talk about density. All right, go ahead, Jan.
I understand contextually, but I just want to make sure that visually we're aware that, not that you all aren't either, that we're going to be putting 90 units on a 3.2 acre spot. That's my, yeah.
Right.
Shut up now.
Yeah. I see Lynn has her hand up. I'm going to go to Lynn and then we'll go to the committee. Lynn? Lynn, you're muted. If you're
I was going to say, I need permission to unmute. Thank you, Lisa, for unmuting me. Hi, everybody. So I've got a couple of questions, Rob, and I appreciate the panelists and the committee bearing with me. But if we go back to slide number 7, and we were talking about tree save, I was just wondering, I want to ensure that when we talk about tree save, that we are not taking down existing trees and replacing them with smaller profile, smaller diameter, or smaller circumference trees. It seems to me that the scope of this project is going to take down quite a few established trees on the site. And that gives me great concern. So the other question that I had was, looking at the proposed EQC, and I think that was on slide number 8. If we, and I think, I don't know if it was Kevin or Mike that was talking about the factual components and the 100-year floodplain, and looking at the blue line versus the orange line, it looks to me that we are giving up a significant area of EQC, current EQC, as defined in the 1993 definition of EQC. We are giving that up, and I think that's around Pond B. And I think that we should respect the existing EQC. And if you all want to amend that with additional, that is awesome. But I think that we need to respect what has been defined in 1993. And if you all want to elaborate on that footprint, then that is fantastic. But I don't think that we should be giving up any current EQC. And I really appreciate on slide number 9, the next slide, that I think is absolutely unacceptable. And I think that we really do need to respect the current EQC, and we need to remove these impacting units from this plan. And no offense to John Amatetti, but given your status as an environmentalist, I'm really shocked that you would approve of this plan. But so my next question is, I can't remember if it was slide number 17 or 18. My question is whether Ivy Oak is amenable to the public access point through their neighborhood. Yeah, it was slide number 17. Thank you, Lisa. This public access point, it's right in the center north. Is Ivy Oak amenable to that public access point? Have you all received agreement from them?
Why don't I jump in there? I know we do have representatives from Ivy Oak, and but you know that we've had a couple conversations with Ivy Oak, and basically, you know, they were going to discuss as a community as to whether they wanted that or not. And if they don't want that, that's fine. You know, we don't have to have a connection through there. If it's something they would like, we're happy to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great to know. And then moving on to slide number 23. I told you I was going to try and be quick. This townhome streetscape, you know, I appreciate what you all did with removing those units in the EQC or the environmental area where there are sycamores that are located in that area. But you said that this design was rendered from community suggestions, and I'm just wondering which meeting that came from, because it's my understanding that this community is very much opposed to this level of density. And if I may make a recommendation, just based on the way that the clusters in the adjoining neighborhoods are configured, I would remove either 2 or 2B and expand the green mews in between each of those rows and increase the amount of open space in between there. But, you know, your reference to, and I think it was probably the next slide, that did a comparison of, yeah, the midline that is currently under construction. No. West Market units, yes. Midline is urban TSA. This site is not TSA, and it is not urban. This is neighborhood, stable neighborhoods, and this is not Tall Oaks has not pleased the community, and we do not want to see a replication of that design element in this area. So I am pleased to say that I'm happy to see that you, Mike, you were acknowledging the proffers from 1993, and that you said you are pleased that you're carrying those forward, but you have to. I think that is a requirement. And I was just wondering if Reston Planning and Zoning, Rob, if you all have received any comments back from staff regarding this revised plan. And if not, I would respectfully suggest that RPZ withhold a vote until such time that you do hear back from staff on this revised application. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Rob, I think you may have gotten muted somehow.
Okay, so thank you, Lynn. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I will mute myself now.
We have not received any direct correspondence from staff, but we really don't, as a committee, have direct correspondence with staff. And I mean, I think what the applicant's trying to do tonight is to represent how we were aware of the staff comments and the staff report, and how the applicant has chosen to respond to those questions. And you know, it's not out of the question for there to be some loose ends that go on to the planning commission that staff still works out with the applicant and then moves on to eventually to the board. But you know, that's kind of for us to decide tonight. So listen, I need to jump in and get to the committee.
Hey, Rob, do you mind if I just, sorry to interrupt, really quickly address just a couple of points that came up here?
Yes, and let me just remind people who are not speaking to mute their phones, please.
I'll keep it pretty quick, and Lynn, you know, definitely appreciate the dialogue comment. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things based off the comments. You know, I'll sort of take it from the back. And this site is in the TSA. It's in the Reston TSA. I fully acknowledge it's not the same as the Midline site, but you know, that's why we're sort of striking the balance by having the 18 acres of open space and the 9+ acres of publicly accessible open space. I really wanted to focus on the EQC comment right here. What we were trying to showcase here is, you know, we've done some extremely detailed analysis of this area, and there is, you know, setting aside the fact that it was shown on this 1993 CDP FDP as EQC, there is, you know, factually, there is nothing about this area that meets the criteria for EQC in terms of the grade. You know, it's not 15% grade, it's 4%. There's existing trails in there now. It's not connected to the stream valley. And so it's for those reasons that, you know, we feel comfortable, you know, revising the EQC, which has certainly been done before. It's happening in other applications right now. The board has the ability to negotiate and modify EQC limits based off of current hydrology, updated standards. And really the history of this site is it was not constructed based off the line on the CDP FDP. There was a site plan that came after the CDP FDP that had a floodplain study. And so that's why you actually see, and I don't have a great graphic of it here, but this little piece right here that does not have the blue EQC, the 1993, this is a pond. This is in the pond right here. So that shows that 1993 CDP level EQC was very conceptual, and that was subject to further environmental analysis. And so that, I just wanted to clarify that's why, you know, John Amatetti can you know, say from where he sits, and he knows a lot more about this than I do, that what we're putting forward significantly benefits the site from meeting the policy guidance for EQC as opposed to that governing line. But I just want to make that clarification. So sorry about that.
Thanks, Mike. I know there's some other public comments in the chat, but we do need to move on into the committee. Let me start with Dick Kennedy. Dick?
Yes. There's two quick questions that I have for now. One is on your Fannie Mae staff report responses in red. I'm not sure I understand what you're saying when you say that the applicant reserves the right to provide gates and I emphasize gates, and restrict public access for exclusively office portion. Now, are you saying that you can have gates around the office building? Or are you saying that you can, if they ask, you'll put up car gates to get into the whole property on the side coming off of Sunset Hills or the side coming off of Reston, Old Reston?
It's a good question, and I can provide a little bit more clarity on that. And you're right that our baseline commitment is that this would be full public access, but we do have a carve out in the proffers to, if there is a secure tenant who has specific needs, we can work with the zoning administrator on providing gates or similar, restrictions. And where those locations would be, let me see, I can zoom in a little bit here, would generally be, we're showing them would either be here along American
I can't see where you're saying.
Oh, I'm
when
sorry.
You say here, where?
Oh, okay.
How
So
about you
it basically on American Dreamway, on that you would have one conceptually on the north side of American along American Dreamway, sort of in between the office and the residential component, and then you could have another one down essentially right when you get to the existing driveway for the office component. So it wouldn't be right at Sunset Hills. So if someone came in at Sunset Hills, they'd still be able to sort of turn around. It would be further up, closer to the, but before you get to the actual office building.
So Dick, to just frame that differently a little bit, just the area right around the office building and the office building parking lot could be blocked. The rest of American Dreamway would be open.
Right.
That's the answer I was hoping to get.
Yep.
And I wanted you to say it because it seems fuzzy otherwise. But you're saying that the restriction, the gate restrictions would be only around the commercial property, correct?
Absolutely correct. That is correct.
Huh? Okay,
Yes.
thanks. Could you quickly show me where the access point off of the walk, the walk area on the north side of the property where there's currently a 6-foot wooden fence?
So that would be right now. And if Ivio wants us to move the fence, we will. But otherwise, the gate, that area where the gate is, we would just take the gate out because there'd be no reason to have it anymore. But right there.
The gate is on the far east side of it?
So the gate's right at the kind of the corner of the property. So there's like an easement from North Shore to this property.
Okay. Do you have a little white marker there that you're showing?
Yeah.
There? Yeah, okay. And isn't there something though that one of the there's about 4 properties along that, it's a long walk. Didn't they want an opening someplace along in the middle so that you could go down through American Dreamway and onto Sunrise Valley?
Yeah, so we're showing, if you're talking about on the north side of American Dreamway,
yes,
along IVO. Yeah, so we are showing a connection, a potential optional connection, sort of further in the center of the site. It should, but that is subject to IVO and what they would prefer to do. Right now, there is not an opening there. If they would like to do that, we are happy to do it. But if they don't want that opening, then we're not gonna move forward with that.
But other people that are walking along there might want it. So
we understand that. Yeah, we do understand that, and that's a very valid point. I think at the same time, we need to be sensitive to the fact that this is the backyard of Ivy Oak. We do have the connection over, at the corner to North Shore, and you can still get we've got a new sidewalk that'll run on our site. And so you can still walk through our site down into the trail network without having to go right behind the Ivy Oak, or you can walk down the publicly accessible portion of American Dreamway going south, down to the Plaza America. So we think they've got alternatives if we can't get that connection there. I think there's other alternatives to get folks through the site and onto the amenities.
Okay, the other thing I wanted to ask quickly is well, maybe I'll pass on that. I'll pass on that for now. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Hey, let me just quickly clarify some earlier discussion that was happening when Lynn was mentioning the TSA area. Just to be clear, this site does fall in the Reston TSA area. It's not in the TOD area, and I think that's an area of distinction. This is actually the fringe of the TSA area for Reston, in between this site and the neighboring site to the north. Just to clarify that.
Thank you, Rob. That's a good clarification. It is TOD, non-TOD.
Yeah, and I get those mixed up all the time. So let me move on to William Pegues.
Okay. I have a couple of comments that here. Basically, one of the things that was stated had to deal with native and adapted plants. And adapted plants are technically not really native plants. And in Reston, being the current vice chair of the Environmental Advisory Committee, we published a document which basically states that we would really prefer to see only native plants that are planted new now, and that would be native not just to Virginia, but to Fairfax County. Adaptive plants are basically a plant that was introduced by people and not native to the area ever. And some of them are beneficial, some of them cause no harm, but still, they're not native plants. The other is that where the trails go right now, if there are any animals that are sort of frequenting the area, those trails are going to make them all flee. There's a study that's going on with a park that's called Bless Park that's in Loudoun County. And basically there, a study was done by Audubon where they put in the flight perimeters or radiuses along trails that were being proposed. The flight meaning not that they flew away, but they fled. And basically what you would have here is that the centers of the lakes might have some areas where something wouldn't be disturbed, which means that any of the species that would come to the shore, there's like two zone types. One is that as soon as someone enters that distance, they will fly away, flee. And then the other is that if it's even closer, they'll never come back. And the third thing was that in talking about lighting, I believe that the board is still looking at lighting considerations and the effect of light at night, and that Reston is moving in the direction, though it hasn't really totally gone that way, but it's being advised to adopt the dark skies program. And so there should be some attempt to integrate that. We shouldn't see lights that are left on all the time. They should go off at certain times. So basically, those three things are right up front a killer for me for this program. The third thing is that, yes, I agree 100% with the statement that these units are way too urban. The lack of a place to put your car other than inside its garage, and have so few other places to place the car, that's really kind of an unacceptable way to develop this specific area. So I think that the problem is that it's a little too dense. Yes, sure, for the total area, it looks good, but basically where the residences are right now is that it's way too compressed. And sometimes I would like to look at it and say, well, where are the utilities coming into the building? And how does an automobile go into its garage without managing to either coming in or out, manage to contact some of these utilities in an unfortunate way? Or where does trash get put out to be picked up along the curb, since many people really you've got to see where the trash people are going to go to pick things up, and so that's where it's going to be sitting. So that's my positions right there, and those four basic things, and they be not resolved right now. I could never vote positive for this project. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Mr. Penniman.
Thank you. Let me just say off at the outset that I think that putting a lot of townhouses in is a huge improvement over 2 office buildings. And even though office buildings don't look very promising now, if the option is available, because these don't get built, there's a good chance that someday somebody will build an office building or 2, which would be much worse. The public access is a huge benefit to the community. Most of the paths are there. They're going to be improved, but they're there. So I don't think that we're going to scare away any new scaring of animals. People use those paths now, just they can be improved. The path contribution, just in terms of distance per dwelling unit, is by far more than Reston Association has with its 55 miles of trail. But I do have some questions on the EQC issue. All I can say is I understand that those can be adjusted if there are good reasons. I don't know if anybody on our P&Z committee has the expertise or the detailed knowledge to know whether these are appropriate ones or not. I appreciate the additional part. That's something I think we will end up having to defer to the Planning Commission, the Board of Supervisors, and the staff. And so I appreciate the additional EQC area, but can't comment beyond that. The 90 units issue, yeah, it looks dense. And if I were in charge of your program, I would eliminate the 6 units closest to ponds A and B. But I don't feel so strongly that I would oppose the proposal over that. I do appreciate the green building, EV charging, and other measures you've put in there that I have to say, damn few other people who've come before us have agreed to do. The issue of joining RA, I don't think we can force you to join RA. I think you'd be smart to join RA. You would give your residents access to pools, tennis courts, and other things that are relatively nearby, and it'd be a great benefit. And if you could swing a deal with RA to maintain this area, that would also be beneficial. But that does lead to a question. What are the ongoing commitments to how these trails and open spaces and ponds will be maintained? Will that be the HOA? Will it be the owner of the big building? Who's going to be in charge?
I can provide a little bit of color on that. We've proffered to having an owners association. So there's basically going to be an umbrella association that includes the office and the residential. And then within that, it can divide up the maintenance responsibilities. And you're right, RA is certainly a consideration with that. And that's a part of, the ongoing, discussions with RAs to sort of, what makes sense, in terms of maintenance obligations. And, we don't want to sort of presume one way or another, I guess, at this point. But, generally we would be able to, as a part of that agreement, with the owners association, divide up what makes sense for the residential, sort of HOA, and then what makes more sense for the office component, and what sort of is a part of that umbrella.
Well, I would say my guess is that neither is going to want the financial and operational responsibility for maintaining the paths around the ponds, maintaining the ponds and so forth. And so tossing a coin and letting them, HOAs are not good for maintaining large areas that are not immediately around their units. And so I hope you can come up with a better plan that gives greater assurance that these will be well maintained. The issue of the LED lights, William is right. It'd be nice to have some kind of limits on darkness and lightness or downward pointing lights. I would suggest that you also talk to RA, because I think his committee has looked at temperatures, appropriate temperatures for lighting to respect the wildlife, bats and everything else. So, please commit to at least consulting and hopefully coming up with an appropriate temperature. Is American Dream Way going to become a VDOT road, or is it still going to be a private road?
It'll be a private road.
Okay.
VDOT will not accept it, mainly because of the bridge and the, that's really the two things, is because of the bridge.
That's fine with me. I just wanted to know, because that also leaves you the possibility of closing it off from time to time for events, for things that I think the residents could appreciate. And so, just one other thing for people who think that they've always had the access to these paths and so forth, so this is not a significant contribution. Let me just say that the office building across Old Reston Avenue, or whatever it is, the insurance company, we tried to get it to open up its land area for public access. They said no, and that was the end of it. So I think that's a very valuable contribution to the community and would be very beneficial. And I think that with a lot of townhouses so close to town center, so close to two subways, is going to be hugely desired. And particularly since, if I understand it right, they're going to make 3-bedroom units. And people have said we don't have enough 3-bedroom units in the TSAs. So that, I think, would also be a selling point. I had another question, but I don't remember what it is, and I should pass that torch to somebody else. But
thank you, Bill. Let's move on to David Bennell.
Rob, I'm going to let Sue go first.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. You've done a lot of work since the last time we saw you. There are some positive things: the relocation of public art, the dedication of public park, public access that was just talked about. Your commitment to join RA is very welcome. Contribution to athletic fields is something that is essential. And we like to see that contribution stay in Reston if possible. Relocating the playground out of the EQC is good. Regarding green building techniques, you mentioned your commitment to Earthcraft or Energy Star. Now, you did talk about quite a few energy features, including solar panels, et cetera. Did you consider striving for LEEDs? Our committee does like to see silver LEEDs or a gold LEED standard.
Yeah, it's a good question. And Steve, you may be able to speak to it a little bit more than I can, but basically with the way the proffers are written, and this is kind of the standard townhome proffer for Fairfax County, is that it reserves the right to sort of look at any of those. So whichever sort of program makes the most sense for the ultimate product and the builder. So that's sort of a high level answer. But notwithstanding that, a couple of the other things that we've carved out are the electric vehicle charging and the solar installation for solar infrastructure. That'll happen regardless. And we sort of got those baseline options. Then from there, it's whatever sort of makes the most sense for the ultimate builder. But I don't know, Steve, if you've got any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I had this come up before. The issue or challenge I'll say with LEED is it was proprietary, and I'll say this, no offense to John, Teddy, and Vika, the people who got rich off LEED were the engineers. I don't mind doing the stuff or the work. Like I used to get LEED points for going to a conference, which didn't seem right to me. I didn't make anything greener. So that's why we didn't write in specifically LEED. We tried to incorporate the ideas without saying specifically LEED, if that makes sense. And then Bill, really quick, I don't mind full cutoff. Streetlights is totally fine. I agree with you on that, by the way. The dark sky, I'm 100% on your team on that one for sure.
Yeah, just to sort of reiterate that, there is the somewhat updated lighting ordinance and the zoning ordinance, and we've got the LID streetlights. But I think I agree with you, Steve. I think that's an easy one for us to go ahead and commit to. And then just going back to the green building, the county for single family attached units, they typically ask for Earthcraft and NGBS, Energy Star, as opposed to LEED, just because it fits the single family model a little bit better in terms of that checklist. And so that's sort of why we list those, but then we give us that carve out for having or equivalent if LEED makes more sense at the end of the day.
And then on DRB, I know with TSA, you're not required to go through DRB, but our committee does like to encourage you to have the plans reviewed by DRB. Did you consider that?
So, and Mike Allen says, so I consider that and I have two answers. I guess my first answer is normally I would say I'm happy to have them review stuff, but some of the answers that have come out of DRB lately have been very difficult for builders. So that's why the townhouses and stuff that we showed as typical for here, they actually came from Reston. They're built on the other side of the toll road. So I'd probably try to avoid DRB just because I think it would take a bunch of extra time. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't like people from DRB to go ahead and look at the plans and make comments. I'm going through this process with y'all. We've gotten great comments, and I think the plan has changed for the better a lot of times. So I hope that answers it.
Okay. One of the reasons I would encourage you to not avoid DRB is you talked a lot about the look and the feel of this design. And frankly, when I saw it a few months ago, my first impression was it's too dense. And I do agree with neighbors that it is too dense. It feels crowded to me. I certainly was concerned about the EQC area north of Pond B. I very much like Bill's idea of the omission of units 14 to 22. I know staff wanted you to delete 1 through 24, but possibly a compromise would be omitting 14 through 22, which would give some breathing space around that Pond B, and also ensure that there's less disturbance onto the floodplain and the EQC. I know you talked about reestablishing and mitigating the EQC disturbances, any disturbances on Pond A and B to Pond C, and you talked about the supplemental area. But frankly, many times those mitigation efforts are not very successful for wetlands. And so I would encourage you to improve the look and feel of this design by going to DRB and by deleting 14 to 22. Thank you.
And Rob, I think I'm going to pass for the time, and you can, I'll maybe come back to you.
Okay, thanks. Hey, Steve, just a clarification. In the questionnaire that we received in the mail recently, under the design review, there was a check mark for RA Design Review Board, and it was a check mark that was planned for this application. So just want to make sure we're clear on information.
And yeah, I mean, I think as Steve said, having sort of that informational, check in, I think is productive. We're happy to do that post zoning.
Okay. All right, next committee member, John Capila.
Good evening. Sorry it takes a second. Thank you for all of your efforts. I know you've been in front of us a few times here. This application. A lot of great comments. Bill Penniman, I think, he wrapped it up the best for me, so I definitely certainly appreciate your efforts on this. I know it's a tough site, but it's a beautiful site. Everyone loves it. Aspects to it, and I don't haven't had any further comments for a while now. Continuing to try to refine this. I certainly appreciate it, and that's all I can say. See what everyone else has to say. Decide at the end here.
Thanks, John. Mike Jennings.
Thanks, Rob. Just two comments. First is that I wish the proffer for RA was a little bit more committal. I would prefer it was worded, we commit to join RA unless they don't want us, rather than we'll have a discussion. But I don't know if we can force you to do that, but that's what I would prefer. The second comment is just more general, that we have many applications come through here, and one of the things that's frequently brought up is, oh, there's this little pocket park, it's really nothing, this really stinks. Well, here we have an application with lots of park-like land, some ponds, some trails that are being given to us, and to me, that's a big deal, that we have a development that's giving, especially close to the metro, this kind of environment where the residents can have sort of a forest and some ponds nearby them. And one last comment is that since this is TOD, I don't think we should expect that it should have the same density as the neighborhoods above it that are outside the TOD. The whole plan is to gradually move down from high rises in the town center to something a little bit less, and then to the established neighborhood. So I just think this fits with what was intended all along. That's it.
All right, Matt.
All right, let me unmute here, turn my camera on. I just wanted to thank the team that's put together with this presentation and has worked with us through quite a few of these meetings. I think that this design and this master plan has gotten better every time we've looked at it, and you have worked to address a lot of the comments and the suggestions that we've made, as well as staff, and I appreciate that. To echo some of the previous comments that we've heard, I also agree that I really don't have an issue with this density on this site. Its proximity to shopping right across the street, its proximity to 2 metro stations, its proximity to a major road with bus stops along it, speaks to me as one of these sort of transitional sites where we're stepping down from this very high density along the toll road and transitioning back into a lower density once you get back into some of the established neighborhoods. So, I might agree that you could probably take a few of these out and it might slightly improve it, but overall, I think the density, the size of these units and the spacing of them is appropriate for this site. I would like to just kind of add on to a discussion we had a minute ago about the green building compliance. I agree that generally LEED is not the sort of best path to compliance for single family residential. Something like Viridian, or Earthcraft, I guess they're kind of tied together now, is probably the better compliance path for this. But I would say, because I fill out that stuff all the time, even within Earthcraft and Veridian, there's multiple different levels of certification, from certified to, bronze to silver to gold to platinum. It would be great to meet something that's a little bit higher than the baseline certification, a silver or something like that. I think that actually going through the checklist for that, this site, you'd get a ton of points just by the nature of, the transit connectedness and the green space. And, there's a lot of things that are already kind of working in your favor. So I would encourage you guys to work towards a higher level of green compliance for this than just the simple baseline, whether it's, Earthcraft or LEED or whatever you decide to go with. But, on any of these development projects, I think that there's always a trade-off, and we have to look at it that way, that there are things that are going to be necessary from your perspective and your performa, but there's also things that we want as a community. And I think that the improvements to this green space, this open space, the trails, the connectedness to the O&D trail, and back into some of the more established neighborhoods overall is a positive to me, and I think it's a positive for the community. So that's all I got.
Matt? Let's see, we're going to Michelle.
Hi, thank you. So while I appreciate your presentation, it seems still very focused on comparing this office, the office option to this residential option. We were here today to hear what you had changed from the last time you were here. And to me, it feels like you're really presenting a false choice, because I don't think anyone actually thinks that that office is going to be built as it was approved many years ago. So really, I find that comparison to be just a complete false choice here. But looking specifically at what you've presented today, I don't see how you're overcoming the issues that staff highlighted and presented on why this should not be approved, specifically with building on the EQC and those units. I recognize you're trying to redefine the EQC, but can you tell us how has staff responded to your new definition there?
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate the question. We've had a couple of sit downs with staff, some really detailed sit downs, and as we talked about, we put together essentially a construction level grading plan, and a lot of their questions were just needing more details to be able to justify the EQC modifications. They weren't so much, I think we sort of moved past the philosophical, can you do this or not? I think everyone acknowledges that you can modify the EQC through a zoning process if it makes sense. And so it came down to, creating EQC, construction level graded cross sections. And we sat down with them and asked them exactly where, we want these to happen and all that. And we, I think a lot of that action was north of Pond B. We feel extremely comfortable that that area north of Pond B really doesn't meet the EQC criteria that's listed right. They've got bullets in the comprehensive plan that talk about what those criteria are. And it's really, that area doesn't, meet that criteria. I will say staff is still talking internally, and there's a lot of details for them to look at. Don't know exactly where they're going to land on that issue, but essentially the high level conversations have been, we all want to get to a resolution and we want to figure out what the path forward is. And I think we know what the path forward is from our end, and we're just kind of waiting for that, just have those final conversations with staff.
And what do you do if staff says no? What's your backup?
Frankly, if staff says no on that, I mean, that's an outstanding issue, and we're going to press forward with that, because we feel extremely confident in being able to explain to the Planning Commission and the board that there's precedent on this site for revising the EQC limits. It's been done on this property before, as well as a number of other properties, and the engineering analysis on it is extremely sound from our perspective, and so that's why we feel very comfortable moving forward, even if that's an outstanding issue. One way or another, and I guess you did sort of bring up the office, and I agree, we have admittedly focused on that a fair amount, but I don't think it's a false choice for us. I know there's skepticism of what the office market is these days, maybe that's not something we build tomorrow, but if this development can't move forward, that is, we have direction from the applicant that is something that they will be pursuing. And that's not a threat. That's not a, you know, it's just something that we don't think is as good of an outcome. But, you know, given that they're set up as a fund, you know, they have to find ways to increase the value of the site, and they can't sit and do nothing, unfortunately. And so that's just a reality that we've been told. You know, is something that they would be, you know, pursuing. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of put that out there because that's just, you know, sort of a direction we've been given.
Mike, let me jump in really quick, and Michelle, yeah, that's a good question. You know, the reality is, you know, we think we're adding open space, we're adding EQC, energy safe, whatever, and I appreciate your point. Scientifically, that's what we have. John Teddy's and Mike Rollband did all the RPA delineation here. That's why these guys are there. Scientifically, they said, here's where the line should be. Right now, the current EQC runs through one of the ponds. The current EQC is wrong. I mean, you can't have an EQC that goes through the pond. So if it's wrong in one place, it can, you know, it's not unreasonable to think that it's wrong everywhere. So with that in mind, we said, hey, we'll field locate the whole thing, and then wherever it is, and design around that. So it's kind of like painting a picture. You know, the canvas is the site, and I take away all the constraints. I start with the constraints, and then you work backwards into the plan. And that's kind of what we did. You know, this is not a UC, and this is a UC. So everything that is a UC, we cannot build in. Everything that is not a UC, go ahead and build. And that's kind of the way I had the guys approach it.
So you also have not really addressed the RA membership. This
So
yeah, go ahead, because this is one that's very big for
No,
this,
I
even
appreciate that.
specifically for this site, because you're not providing enough for the residents.
So on the RA membership, the language we have in the proffer is exact language that RA dictated to me. Yeah, I gave them our language, and they made some edits, and then we dropped that language exactly into our proffers. And you know, I think it's interesting here. It's kind of and this is sorry Rob to take up time. This is a global thing. You know, it's slippery slope. At some point, what happens if people are saying, oh, you have to use VICA, or you have to use Bowman, or you have to use McGuire Woods? You know, it's not right for a public body to force you to use a certain consultant or any private entity. And that's why we set up that way. And that's why I used the language that RA gave me.
No, I understand that, but I think that RA probably feels that it's in a awkward position. And as you heard from Mike Jennings, it would be much better if you'd had just committed to join RA. That's
Why
how
don't we ask Larry Butler? Larry, you on the phone?
I am. Hello?
What are your just in general on the subject?
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer if it was a full commitment, but you know, the truth remains the county nor RA can force any property owner to subject their property to the covenants. The language that we suggested is stronger because it actually talks about a supplementary declaration, which then subjects the residential property to the RA covenants going forward, which is what we've done on all the other property additions over the past 4 years that are in the TSA. Yeah, I'd be happy with a stronger commitment that says, yes, we will. I don't know if the applicant will do that.
You know, and Michelle, one other thing, which makes the conversation with Larry, the future conversation, a lot easier, is we changed one of the trails around the easternmost pond to be public. So we kind of reshaped what the office would look like. So in effect, we took the office out of the issue of the maintenance of the ponds. So that's going to help me when I talk to Larry later.
Well, you know, the RA board has already decided that they're not going to take on the maintenance of your ponds.
That's not what they told me.
Larry, isn't that what the board decided, that the pond maintenance will not be taken on by RA?
There hasn't been an actual vote to that matter, but you know, our preference, you know, quite frankly, Steve, the earlier notion of having the joint association with the office building and the residential maintaining the property, I thought made perfect sense. And I think that should still be considered. Because again, taking on the responsibility for the ponds and the trails, which if they're not 8 feet, that's not our standard anyways. That requires a much deeper discussion on the cost benefit analysis of that activity.
And I think that's sort of, Larry, you hit the nail on the head there as to why we have the proffer set up the way we do. Is, obviously the ponds need to be maintained. That's a profit requirement, and that's something that we want to keep doing. But the questions of RA membership, there's details to work out there, right? And I like your point about the covenant or the supplemental declaration. But at this sort of zoning level, I think we have it about as tight as a proffer as you're going to see. Knowing that there are some conversations that need to happen in terms of maintenance and whether that makes sense for RA versus the umbrella association here for things like the ponds.
I think you're hearing that we do not want to take on the ponds. And so it's with proffer 14, the last sentence saying that that urban park space can be transferred to RA. Does that include the ponds?
I'll tell you, Michelle, the first that I'm hearing of what you just said is right now. I haven't even thought of it. It never occurred to me. This is just part of the conversation we'll have with Larry. I literally, the last time we talked with RA, they were going to take control of the ponds.
Well, and to that proffer language, that only happens if RA agrees to it. And if RA doesn't agree to it, then we can't transfer it over to them, and we do need to maintain the ponds. And so you have the flexibility to do either if everyone agrees to it, but it's certainly not presuming that that's what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and if I can just jump in also, and there may be a way to slice and dice it. Maybe there's one thing on the pathways, one thing on the ponds and landscaping. Yep. There's a lot of different ways to slice that would possibly make sense for both the new cluster or association here and RA for the benefit of its memberships with these homes being our members.
I think I would feel more comfortable if it was more clear in the proffer that the pond maintenance is going to be the obligation of the commercial and residential tenants, and not indicate that it could fall into RA.
Okay. Yeah, Steve, I think we can talk about that.
Why did you not consider the 2/2s that staff recommended?
To make it economical, I did do a 2/2 plan here a long time ago. There were 144 units. That's what it would have taken to make it make sense. The problem that I have with the 2/2s was the parking and the traffic. There's a lot more cars.
And then the sidewalk. So I'm trying to also see if you have kids living in the ones that face the central muse. I guess there's a crosswalk that they can get through to get to. How are kids going to get to the playground there?
Yeah, we've got crosswalks set up. Let me see if I can. This is probably not the best one to show you. Let me flip to.
Will it be like Tall Oaks, where you're driving through the backs and there's trash cans and you're kind of like walking through?
I mean, I think in any of these units, you've got the ability to come around here or shoot down this area, and then you've got a crosswalk here or through here that gets you down to the playground area.
Mm-hmm.
So we wouldn't expect folks to need to sort of walk through here or anything like that. I think we've got a crosswalk anywhere to get you from one side of the development to the other. I think to the area you're talking about, I think the two key ones would be coming across the private drive here as well as on this side.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious from my questions where I'm headed. Since you haven't figured out RA membership, since the pond maintenance is still not finalized, and since it does look like you're insisting on building units where staff has said they should not be built, I don't think that, when people are talking tonight necessarily about density, I mean, at least when I read staff's report, it was not so much how many units, but where are the units being built? And so it is a shame that you weren't able to figure that one out. But I do understand what you're saying in redefining the EQC. But still, I think there's too many outstanding things for me. So that's what I've got for today.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Rebecca.
Hey. Oh, there I am. Hey, everybody. Thanks for the presentation. I can tell that you've been listening to us every time you've come back, and I really appreciate you trying to address everything that we're putting forward to you. The things that I had about the site access, you addressed, and then, of course, the being part of RA, it sounds like that's ongoing. Um, the the density, I mean, yeah, it would probably look nicer if there were fewer houses, but also we kind of have a shortage of housing right now. And so I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference. So I don't have any questions for you. I'm just struggling internally with the density issue and the RA membership. But thank you for coming and always listening to what we're saying.
Thank you, Rebecca. Tammy Petrine.
Thank you. I echo Rebecca's concerns. The staff unequivocally said this is too dense. You didn't do a thing about that. I will tell you for a fact, RA board has never heard about this. So any conversations you've had with RA, you know, I don't know who you're talking to, but the board doesn't know anything about this. And there are 143 clusters who are members of RA. There is no way in hell that RA can take responsibility for maintenance on any one cluster, because the other 143, you would be 144, would want the same deal. And that is not going to happen. The RA has incredible current challenges with upgrading and maintaining existing amenities. The last thing they need to do is take on super expensive maintenance and complicated thing for which they have no expertise, such as pond maintenance and wetlands maintenance. So no thanks, that's not happening. And I was annoyed as hell, frankly, to get this giant paper drop on Friday afternoon, sent a message to Rob saying, where is the document saying what changes? You know, you gave us a huge paper dump and then not any information on what the changes were. So we're supposed to go through hundreds of pages of paper to try to figure out what are the changes. So somebody asked this afternoon to Mike, what are the changes on 4 documents or 3? Bang, he shot them out immediately. Too bad. You know, some of us have tried to struggle through this, frustrated as hell all weekend, when you could have given us that and it would have been straightforward and honest. So yes, number 14 RA on the proffers, that's not happening. Number 20 on page 9, you have another thing for RA down there regarding transfer of the trail and maintenance agreement for the trail to Reston Association. Ditto that one. I don't, again, did I understand that you shortened the driveways so that cars cannot park in their own driveway?
Yeah, that was a comment we received from staff, as well as some of the feedback we received on some of the community meetings when there was a worry about cars overhanging the driveway.
Yes,
and the desire to get the playground out of the EQC. And so, you know, you've got the parking in the garage, and you know, we thought that was a better outcome.
Yeah, so you've got $1 million to $1.2 million townhouses and no place for people to park their cars. And then you use the word, there's ample parking on the site. That's crazy. I don't know what you think is ample parking, but you have a service person, a guest, a delivery, or whatever, and no place for that to take place. The streets and the density of this place is a mimic of tall oaks, which is a unmitigated disaster as far as most of us are concerned with fine design, and we're not going to approve that. Your streets are too narrow. William Peggy's brought that up at the very beginning. How do you even get in a garage without crashing into your neighbor's garage door or the edge of it? Your streets are so narrow. It's just ludicrous that this beautiful site that has so much potential, you could have gone up and have 90 units. You're talking about 2 over 2s. Instead of 90, you jump to 143. The price level that you're asking is high. You could definitely have elevators and you would have made that work and the site would have been fabulous. But no, you've got to eke out more and more and more profit. And it is not sitting well with those of us who are concerned with this is the most beautiful site for residential in Reston. And if you go ahead with 90 units or 87 or whatever, I was laughing when I read this that you're going to ask the Army Corps of Engineers if that little space with the sycamores really has to be dedicated to wetlands. Can you just wipe that out and pack back in the 2 units? But you didn't say that during your presentation, but I read it in these papers. So I don't know, either I'm reading fiction or something. So as you can see here, I am annoyed. DRB, if you wanted good information on reconstructing a better layout, you're late to the plan. You want us to approve this, and then supposedly you'll go back to the DRB and get some hints from them. You're too late for that. You want us to rush through before we have even heard what the staff answers are to your little red marks on your paper. No, that's not happening either. We would like to know what the staff. There's no big rush for this. The rush is on your part, not on our part. So, things are cranking up. Hey, it is what it is. But if you want to put this kind of money into this site and have a beautiful project that's highly touted versus something that people are like, what the hell are they thinking? 90 units or 87? This is way too dense for this plan. And I will not be voting for it. Thank you. Oh, by the way, also another thing in what I read is the floodplain data isn't even up to date on this. So you're assuming that floodplain will come back okay. That study hasn't even been finished as far as what I was reading today in the stuff you sent. So I'm not voting for this. Good. That's all.
Thank you, Tammy. All right, I think I'm the last board member, and then we have a couple comments I might pull out of the chat of some of the people from the public that I think had to leave.
No, you missed. You're missing Katie. Did she talk already?
Katie's not here tonight. Katie wasn't able to come.
Oh, okay.
So listen, a couple of comments that I have. I mean, I think it's really important to recognize that the site is in the TSA area. So it is a little bit different than the way people have, projected it, certainly relative to some of the neighboring communities. I personally am not a fan of some of the newer, smaller townhomes, but there is a product that people do like, and for different reasons, less maintenance or whatever, and they live in a different environment than I'm sometimes used to. But I lived in a very small townhouse when I was young, and actually it was, it worked out fine. But there's been a lot of talk about the EQC, and as an engineer in this area, I deal with EQC a ton. An EQC, if you go to the policy plan like it was described, and John Amatetti did a great job at least explaining it tonight, it's a negotiated thing based on a bunch of factors, and the fact of the matter is there are sometimes factors that sometimes you can get an EQC that's kind of a rough order of magnitude, but then it can be further refined later. So So, that's not out of the question here. I think it comes down to what's the quality of the area that's being talked about. And this applicant at least came back and they saved that one sliver of wetland. And I personally went out and looked at that wetland. And so I kind of appreciate the fact that they at least, try to accommodate that. So, with that, I just, I do think that with the package that they submitted, did try to address some of the county comments and the county staff comments. Once again, we run into this debate where we do have a county staff report that showed a denial. The applicant's working with county staff. We're probably not going to have the privilege of getting any type of final report before this goes on to the planning commission, and that is sometimes the way it goes. But I have every bit of confidence in John Carter and the applicant working things out with county staff. Will it be a perfect plan? Maybe not, and not even in my view, where there's a lot of little nits that I would have liked to see done differently. But I think the positives greatly outweigh the negatives in this particular case, and as many of my colleagues here have mentioned tonight. So I'll leave it at that. And I wanted to go just quickly to the chat, just so I don't forget to acknowledge.
What about John Carter?
Well, I'm Tammy, I'm not there yet. I'm just going to Rena Corey's comment was, she says, my only comment is we don't want canyon-like streets like the ones just built at the Tall Oak site. This would require removing one of the north-south facing rows and increasing the distance between the remaining rows. And you could probably add a house or two to the east-west facing rows if you do this. This also affects child safety. The narrow canyon-like streets are much less safe for young children on bicycles. Let's see, I just lost her. Oh, sorry about this. I clicked too fast. She said, okay, the narrow light canyon streets are much less safe for young children on bicycles. We want this neighborhood to be family and kid friendly. And then Michelle Silver also had a comment, and I think she had to depart. She says, hello, the North Shore cluster still believes it's too dense. Also, the North Shore cluster agrees with the language in the proffer number 60. Oh, hold on again. My computer's bouncing around here. Agrees to the language in proffer 60, but opposes the language in proffer number 20 that the fence and the trees be removed if a secure tenant moves in. The fence and the trees provides a critical buffer between North Shore cluster and the Fannie Mae building. And if this is approved, we would ask that the hours of construction be altered Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So I think I covered that was what was in the chat. So the one final comment I'll make is, one of the things we haven't talked about is there's often been this comparison of office to residential and what happens if the residential doesn't come in and people not believing that there's a marketplace for the future office. The one thing we've seen in Reston is just the opposite, where the office market fails and then there's a no tenant, and then the site lies foul, and then they don't maintain the site, and then we have another burden on our hands. And so I hadn't heard anybody talk about that, but we have seen that on occasion in Reston where the market has shifted. So just something to keep in mind. All right, so with that, we do want to go to Commissioner Carter.
Okay, just a couple. I think we've heard most of everything, but maybe a couple new things. I guess I didn't understand. You're getting approval for 90, but the layout has 87. So we want to figure out why that is. There's a concern. This is a detail setback from the pond area. And then the last one, which is a general one, and I'm not sure what to do about this. This layout. We're seeing lots of this kind of layout. This is certainly significantly better than Tall Oaks. It doesn't have any units fronting on an alley, which is what Tall Oaks does. This has your lawn panel, your sidewalk, a teeny tiny front yard, and then the unit. It might be good to do a little layout. I've seen these on office buildings, but how does a service vehicle get in there? So how would a trash truck work in this? I thought that was a pretty good comment. But the last one again is we've had things like Sika, we've had Toll Brothers, we have EYA going up. It's a different layout, and I think the group, we ought to take that on. There are tweaks that you can make to those to make them better and to make them unlike tall oaks. But it's a notion of whether Reston is going to accept those kind of layouts or not. And I think that's a grander discussion. I'm not sure where we go with that. I would be interested in what the design review board did. I assume they were involved in tall oaks, but I don't know. So that's what I have so far. And I'm not going to repeat all the other things that people have said. I'm sure the staff will have some interest. That'll be an interesting staff report. And I hope that comes out before we go to the PC. Well, that has to come out before we go to the planning commission.
Right. Thank you,
Okay.
Commissioner Carter. David Vanel, I know you reserved or held back. Do you have a comment?
Well, yeah, I'm kind of up in the air about this. I think the overall design, I think it's too dense. The fact that the applicant is doing all of the work on the ponds and all the work on the public access, and it sounds to me like, you know, whether the neighboring communities like the whole thing or not, at least they have access to through this site and into this site, and then through this site to shopping and all that other stuff. I wish there were some way that they could reduce the number of townhouses. I think I think it's in a perfect place, frankly, in terms of distance from the two stations. It's right. I think the 3/4 mile bisects your property. I'm just not convinced that this is that the density here is structured properly. I think it needs to have fewer homes, or 2/2s, or something that doesn't encroach upon the wetlands and the ponds and all that stuff. I'm really up in the air about it.
Thank you, David.
A couple more for me, Rob, if I could. I'm just
sir.
thinking out loud a little bit. We need to solve this RA issue. This comes up on every project, and I don't understand why we can't get to. I understand the developers push back about this, but I think we should have a better understanding ourselves with RA on where to go. Do we want them to join or do we not? And this sort of dancing around and in between, you know, we're going to run out of projects here pretty soon, but we ought to settle that. Again, the layout, this whole alley width and getting into the garages, I think we need to figure that out. And then the last thing, whether this gets approved or not, certainly the things in this are setting a new standard, and I hope we can keep doing that. I think the attention to the environment, particularly the energy conservation, was a good discussion. This project went way beyond anyone else has done, and I hope we're setting a new standard on that. And maybe there's some other things that we could set up. This trail system, I don't know, that's another RA. What does RA maintain and what does a cluster maintain? We shouldn't be all over the place at this point in Reston's time of development. So I think as a group, we ought to work some of those things out and stop this. It happens on every project. So anyway, those are my additional thoughts.
I know we tried to handle the RA issue during the initial task force that was established, and the county really gave us pushback because of the legality of
I know.
the concern. So, but I agree with you. It's such an important issue that that needs to have more weight being able to be given to it, even if it's not a, you know, I don't know, a legal requirement. But
Rob, this.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if I could just say, if it can't legally be forced, we can't preserve our credibility and deny projects because we don't like what they do on RA. We think we can strongly encourage, we can do that. We just can't say no if there's no legal authority to require it. I'm sorry, I wish I could, but our credibility is at stake at that point.
Yeah, no, Bill,
Why don't we see what the county attorney says about that directly?
Yeah, well, that has been the county attorney's response, but I do agree that we do have to be careful, and that's why we've always tiptoed around it. We because it can't be a mandate by the county, then therefore we really can't mandate it. It's not a code. It's not something that anyone's violating, and so then we get stuck in this middle position awkwardly so often. So, you know, I hope Commissioner Carter can help spearhead some effort, and I'll be right on that bandwagon to help figure this out, because I really think that that's an important issue and always has.
I'm going to do that. I just think we need to stop this.
Could I ask a question?
You know, on our RA membership, we're asking that they put it in their proffers. I mean, there's a difference then that the applicant certainly can proffer to do this versus, you know, us demanding it. We don't need to demand it. They can also just put it in their proffers. It doesn't have to be part of the comp plan.
I think that's a good point, Michelle. Proffers are voluntary, folks. They're voluntary. Wink, wink. Yes, I know, but that's what a proffer is. It's a voluntary commitment. So maybe, but I'll talk to the county attorney. I think we should get this.
Could I ask a question of whoever knows the answer? And that is, there have been references to having to redo deeds. Now, I know those of us who are members of RA, it's in our deeds, but is the idea that somehow anybody who joins or has their townhouses joins has to redo deeds, which would again push us past an edge I don't think we can cross.
Yeah,
It needs to be covenanted, I would assume.
Right. Yeah, this is Larry. So what we've done with the other properties, we wrote a supplementary declaration. It's hard to say fast. And we do that before any of the lots are sold, so that when an individual purchases from the builder, the property is already subject to the RA covenants.
Yeah.
So it's an amendment to the deed.
Yes, I think so. Well, there is no deed on it now.
Yeah,
There is no deed.
It's a supplemental deed.
Okay, well, Virginia is a very property sensitive state.
Yeah.
And that's an awful lot for the Reston Planning and Zoning Committee to be able to demand, I would think.
Yes, it is. All right. Listen, they are looking for a vote tonight. It's a little after 10 o'clock. I think we need to kind of entertain a motion.
I'll move that it be approved. Subject to their working out the EQC issues with whoever carries ultimate responsibility.
All right. Is there a second to that motion?
A second. Mike Jennings.
Mike seconds. All right. Comments?
Can we have a friendly amendment?
Can I make one short comment?
I think Sue asked for if she can have a friendly amendment. Was that you, Sue?
Right. I actually was going to make a motion to approve the plan, but based on deleting the 9 units, numbers 14 to 22, to reduce density and lessen disturbances in the EQC. But this could be just added as friendly amendments to Bill's
I don't accept the
deference.
amendment.
But he doesn't accept it.
All right,
Okay.
so that wasn't
I mean,
accepted. Dick,
personally, I would like it. Maybe some staff can persuade them to do it, but frankly, if 10 more people get to live in a location as terrific as I think this location is going to be, I don't want to be the guy who said they couldn't do it.
Yeah, and I just, think in terms of, I think it's been a lot of thoughtful conversation, a lot of good comments. I think the initial motion that was put forward in terms of subject to working out the EQC issue, we can certainly live with that in some other, conditions, whether it's, LED lighting or looking at dark skies or some of those, dropping the 9 units probably isn't going to be financially feasible for the project. So that's one that we probably wouldn't be able to support just from our.
Mike, this is the committee's time for discussion.
yeah. Well, let's keep going here. So Dick Kennedy, did you have a question?
Yes. I find it amazing that they wouldn't put RA membership in when they thought that RA was going to pay for the ponds and the paths. And now they're debating whether they're going to do it. So that should give a little signal about what the attitude is of these owners regarding being good community members.
Tammy, there's a motion on the floor. Do you have a comment about the motion?
About it. Yes, and I am having a discussion about it. They will not enter. Well, I guess it's Bill that won't entertain, but Mike just spilled his beans inadvertently that he wouldn't take away 7. So they want 87 units packed in here, and this is without any 200 square foot backyard for stuff. And no, I'm done.
Thank you, Tammy. Dick Kennedy, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
I don't have a question. I have a comment. I thought you asked for comments.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. This is the motion still is out there for comments.
I'm having a hard time on the different issues as much as I've ever had. And as a matter of principle, I don't think we can tell developers how many units they can have. But especially when it's larger than we think is design appropriate. I'm not against it for density purposes. I'm against it because I don't think it's going to work out well for them. And it's going to head a little bit toward the Tall Oaks thing, although I heard John Carter say that he didn't think so. So those things are the hard things to balance. And I guess but that's our job. So go ahead.
That's why they pay us the big bucks, Dick.
Yeah.
All right. The motion is on the floor.
This is Michelle. Bill, would you consider also subject to removing from the proffer that RA could take over maintenance of the ponds?
I don't accept that because all they're doing is saying they'll talk to RA about it. If RA says no, RA says no, but telling them they can't talk to them doesn't make sense to me. So I don't accept that amendment. Thanks, Michelle.
It need to be in the proffer though. They can talk to RA. There's no reason for it to be there. I see what you're saying, but yeah, I just don't think it needs to be there.
All right. Any other comments on the motion?
Rob, this is John. I apologize. I had to step away for just a second. Can you reiterate the motion?
So the motion is to approve the plan subject to the applicant working through the issues on the EQC. It was made by Bill Penniman and seconded by Mike Jennings.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do a voice vote for this just because it's.
Forgive me, Rob. I'm sorry, but we did hear Mike say that he would also entertain dark skies as part of the.
Michelle, it's not part of the motion. It's not a part of the motion right now.
No, it's not. So I was going to ask Bill if he would include that in his subject to EQC and also including dark skies.
I would not, even though I support the dark skies issue, but there are about 10 things we've asked them to think about. And if we clutter up the motion with that many, I trust them that they will work with the RA on that issue because they said they would. So I'd like to keep the motion simple. But I appreciate your point.
This cannot be a voice vote. It needs to be hands so that who voted for and against can be recorded for the minutes.
Oh, well, that's fine. I mean, I just want to make sure I don't use the hand tool in the chat as the way to calculate. So let me start with you, Tammy. If everybody's ready to vote.
Say, Rob, I have a thought. John Carter.
Sir.
So this is tentatively going on April 27th.
Correct.
With the EQC standing out there, I wonder what the applicant would think about coming back on the 25th. Not voting now, coming back on the 25th. I don't know which way the vote's going, but.
Yeah, we actually have a pretty loaded night that night at the moment. We would likely have to schedule something different.
And I know this is the committee's time, but I think there was sort of a question directed to the applicant.
Yes.
I think the way that the motion was crafted was subject to working through the EQC issue.
Yeah.
So I think with that, we're sort of getting at the heart of that issue. So I think the applicant would prefer to have the vote tonight. Also realizing the scheduling issues that the committee's having as well.
Okay.
Appreciate the comment though.
All right, let's take a vote here. I'm going to start with Tammy Petrine.
No.
Tammy is a no. Let's see. And are you on camera, Tammy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure am.
I'm just looking. I'm just not everybody. I can't see everybody at the same time. All right, Rebecca.
I'm still conflicted. Yes or no? Can you come back to me? I'm still thinking.
Michelle, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm a no. And I just want to say too, some of the things that the applicant was applauded for were also things that we highlighted as a committee and they had to come back multiple times. And it would be nice to see so much of this handled earlier on. So this has been very frustrating and conflicting, but yeah, I'm a no.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Matt.
Yes.
Mike Jennings.
Yes.
John Capila.
2.
Also
That's it.
conflicted and a lot of challenges, but I think they've done as good as they can here. I vote yes.
Thank you, John. Sue Straits.
No.
Sue.
No.
Okay. Then David. David Vanell.
No.
Bill Penniman, who made the motion, but need a vote.
Yes.
Okay. William Pegues.
No.
Okay. Dick Kennedy.
Yes.
And then I'll vote Rob Walker as a yes. And we've got to go back to Rebecca.
I guess I'm gonna break the mold and I'm gonna go with yes.
All right, let me make sure I have everybody here. All right, there's 12 of us here tonight. There's 7 yeses, which means there would be 5 noes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 noes. So that motion passes. So, you know, I think what this shows us tonight is there's plenty of issues out there that we still need to tackle, that many of them are out of our control, and we're all trying to do the best we can to kind of balance this, you know, what's the right thing to do versus the standards of where they are, and you know, where things are with housing and all kind of uses and mixture of uses and whatnot. I think Commissioner Carter had a good idea on a couple of these issues that maybe could be like workshops or something, but
That's what
I
I
do
was
think,
thinking.
yeah, and I do think we need to encourage applicants to come to us earlier, where we can have more of a dialogue about some of the concerns that were raised, because there's a lot of good content out there about, you know, just how do people use these facilities and such. And I think we're going to see this on some future applications as well. Yeah, this one was a tough one. This, I think, and I think everybody's feeling it. I think everybody across the board has felt this push pull, but the applicant has come a long way, and I got to commend them for at least the effort that they put into this. And you know, we've seen other people come to us and just get a denial and move on, and they just, you know, got to take their chances. And so I do applaud this applicant for at least working with us and trying to work through some of those issues. And now Commissioner Carter has the hard job along with county staff, and that's really the reality. This thing is not done. I mean, this, even though what we've done tonight, it just allows them to move forward, and then there's still a lot of uphill battle to get through.
I still wonder about this RA issue. That bothers me. I wonder about maybe more of us need to get out. I've started to do that a little bit with other people. Get out and see these developments, these townhouse layouts, the Tall Oaks and the EYA and the West Market and the Toll Brothers and the Sika, and go out and see those and look at those. I see this stuff all over the county, and it some are better than others. And I must admit, it's primarily in the details, but I wonder where we want to go as a Reston community. Then the energy standards, I feel like we're making progress on that. And then I guess it's all up to the staff and the EQC on this one, I think, is where it's going to land. But okay. I think workshop idea would be a good one.
Yeah, no, I do too. Well, I think we have no other agenda item tonight, thank goodness. But I will take a motion to dismiss, I guess, if there so be it.
What's Rob? Not to keep me talking, but what's coming up? Did you say the Comstock is coming up?
Yeah, in my last update, I did indicate some of the latest. So Commerce Center from Comstock has asked to come before us in April. We've also been trying to do an update with the task force. And quite honestly, that might need to be a special meeting, but we might be able to slip that in on April's meeting. But the Lofts 2 at Pulte, the Sunset Hills Road project, I think they want to come in now in May.
Where is that, Rob? The Lofts 2?
Yeah, so that is just west of the post office. It's on the other side of the street from Sunset Hills, from the post office, and just west. So there's two low-rise, I think, office buildings that are being, I guess, torn down. And
okay, thank you.
I'd like to sponsor a walkthrough for the Sunrise Valley for the Comstock development some Saturday between now and the April meeting. And no, Michelle, you don't have to run the distance.
And if I
Happy
can
to
request, Rob,
I know you would.
please request that presenters get their stuff to us before Friday, before a Monday
yes.
meeting. This
Yep.
is crazy. And if especially if they're repeat, what is changed? We don't want another paper drop like this. That's abusive.
Yeah, Tammy, you're
That's
absolutely, Tammy,
hours to go through the plans to try to ferret out what the changes are. And they didn't have the courtesy of telling us that.
yeah, Tammy, you're absolutely right. It is getting out of hand a little bit where applicants are being a little bit late, and I know there have been a lot of changes, so that's why this one was even yeah, they need to do a better job, and somehow we need to get that done.
Rob, on this, I agree 100% with Cammie there. The other point I would make is the presentation with the that the supervisor would like us to make as the Reston Planning and Zoning Committee about the situation with his revisions for the Reston component of the county. I think that should be a standalone meeting. It has a lot of issues in it, I think, and I think we would not do a good service to without that. But you may want to ask John Carter about that too. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, and actually, Dick, right before Jose left, we were trying to set up that date, and I do think that there has some dates been thrown out that I need to revisit and maybe throw that out there to the group, because we did think that April was looking too busy and May was starting to get busy, and we needed to actually get this update sooner than later.
Right.
So I guess that's a question to the group. If everybody feels that they're willing to tackle another night, another evening, just to hear about the Reston master plan update, and it, it may not be a Monday, it might be just a whatever, because it's whenever the availability of folks are, but I agree with you. I think it's important enough to dedicate a separate night to just that only.
So,
Perhaps you can send out a doodle.
Yeah.
so that would be great, but it would also, having attended some of these meetings, there are enough people on our group that were on the task force, and this is also a group that will have a better understanding of the plan and what it can do. It would be great if we could use this as less of a just hear a presentation about the plan and more about actually providing some, insight into what folks would want to see different or what you like, because I think that's really what's needed at this point.
I agree too. I think that I think the supervisor's office should tell us particularly the issues he would like some feedback on, because I think that was what Jose was saying to us that he wanted.
Yeah, and then if anyone has specific issues they want to bring up, I think we should really get down to details instead of just going through the generic overview, which I don't think many people in this group really need.
For the committee, the document, the lengthy document, and then the staff's high-level comments are available. I think Jose either posted them where you can find them, or maybe he even forwarded them to every member of the P&Z. But Michelle's right. This is going to take, and as is Dick, this is going to take a full evening, because I'm sure that everybody on this committee has lots of questions and lots of opinions. So I think trying to meld it into a regular meeting is not a good idea.
Okay, so we'll work on getting some dates thrown out there. It's going to be primarily based on the availability of those who are coming to present, but I'll get more information and get that out to the group as soon as I can.
Sorry to add another issue to your schedule there, Rob, but
No, that was an important one though. That's been a lot of hard work being done on that, and it's good we want to get it right.
The other option is get 2 dates, pick 2 dates, and people can say which ones they want, and the one that gets the most votes is the date you go with.
Yeah, and there are other opportunities. There was a lot of meetings with other groups, and it's not that say that we couldn't be invited to other groups' meetings should we miss one or two. So there's other opportunities there. So yeah, okay.
This is an opportunity, though, to provide a different viewpoint, and specifically how each of us use the comprehensive plan as we're reviewing applications before us. So to the extent that we can bring that, I don't think that that has happened in any of the meetings that I've attended so far.
Okay. All right. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Thank you, Dick.
Second.
All right. Thanks everybody for all your efforts. Yeah, this was a tough one tonight. But it'll, I guess, make us stronger. So everybody have a good night.
Thank you. Take care.